Huh. Rad-Zone core by Richard Siegler. Well, shit. Oh, right, yeah. Well, it looks like Richard Siegler beat me to the punch to review the Rad-Zone core. But F it, we ball. The Rad-Zone core is an evolution of our Index detachment, one that was seen as a side grade in some regards, as we lost some very powerful tools, like the Omni Sterilizer and Vengeful Fallout. For those of you who haven't made the connection, the Manipulus was ludicrously strong with the Omni Sterilizer enhancement, and thus coined the term Omnipulus, which is me. GW killed me. For this, the Rad-Zone core got some changes to their detachment rule, which made it far more playable than before. That being said, this is the generalist detachment, so there is a lot of room to play with here, but seemingly seems to emphasize battle line, which is a reoccurring theme with our army. However, it is not solely limited to them, it just rewards you for bouncing things back and forth with them, which is nice that it doesn't completely neglect units from your roster. To start, the Rad-Zone core detachment rule is called Bombardment, which is a cool two-parter mechanic. At the beginning of the game, every unit from your opponent's deployment zone can choose one option out of two, either to stand firm or to take cover from the incoming 7-kill streak carrier strike.
Legalize nuclear bombs.
Swag Messiah.
If the unit stands firm, on a roll of 3 up, the unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. If they decide to take cover, then the roll will change from a 3 up to a 5 up to deal D3 mortal wounds, but the unit will become battle shocked. The initial barrage is nice to be able to chip away some unavoidable wounds, potentially changing your opponent's decision on their turn 1 plays if they are dealt significant damage. While D3 might not seem like a whole lot of damage, D3 through all of the units in your opponent's deployment zone can start to deal a decent amount of wounds across the board. The downside to this initial bombardment is that your opponent is heavily incentivized to take cover. Getting battle shocked and lowering your chances of dealing damage is a small price to pay turn 1. However, since it's been changed for the battle shock to last until the end of the first battle round, it could affect your opponent's chances to score action secondaries or use stratagems if you deal damage turn 1. The second part of this rule is called Fallout, taking place at your command phase every turn after, again targeting every unit in your opponent's deployment zone. On a 3 up, you deal a mortal wound and force a battle shock test. This is a nice little damage to the enemy's backline if they have a screen of weak units sitting in the deployment zone, potentially opening up a deep strike opportunity you wouldn't have, or battle shocking units in the back that can't be reached to deny them a primary point. This rule is really just a nicety, and nothing that you should be solely relying on. There are some fun lists, however, that try to keep enemies in the Fallout zone as long as possible to maximize the possibility for damage. I think it's fun and janky, but don't rely on locking enemies to their deployment zone as your only method to win. Speaking of the detachment rule, our first enhancement is Radial Suffusion for 25 points. Starting at the second turn, when the Fallout portion of your detachment rule is in effect, the range at which the Fallout spreads is increased by 6 inches to your opponent's deployment zone. While it's a bit of a strange read, don't get it confused, it's just extending the range from where the rule would normally look into your opponent's deployment zone. This is nice to try and force a bit more battle shocks and damage to positions where cover is usually placed and units try to stage. While I don't think it's an auto take at all, I do think it's one of those enhancements you look to fill the last 25 points of your list with. The second enhancement we have is Malphonic Susurrus, giving the bear and the units the stealth keyword. This is really solid for 20 points, giving that unit an extra touch of survivability that it otherwise wouldn't have. This is nice to throw onto something that you want to keep around and disincentivize shooting towards, such as a block of Castellan robots or Cataphren breachers. It's good insurance for those heavy investments. The third enhancement is Peerless Eradicator, giving your bear and the unit it's leading sustained hits 1 on their ranged weapons for 20 points. This right here is your auto take enhancement, and best utilized on Cataphren breachers being led by a Manipulus. This will give the Break of Breachers both lethal from the Manipulus and sustained from the enhancement, making this an exceptionally deadly unit, especially within rapid fire range of those arc rifles. This also applies to their Overwatch, allowing your reroll hits passive to fish for 6s and get 2 shots out of them instead of 1, making them twice as dangerous. The prime definition of fire and forget. Autoclavic Denunciation is the last one here for 15 points, being a bit underwhelming but not entirely useless. It gives the bear's ranged weapon anti-infantry 2 and anti-monster 4, and only the bear, not his unit. This works pretty well with the transionic cannon of the Manipulus, as it has devastating wounds in Torrent, meaning that it can push through some unavoidable damage pretty easily. And for 15 points it's not a bad upgrade whatsoever, but since we can only take 3 enhancements, this one's usually the one that gets cut first. It's also to say that this one is interchangeable with Radial Suffusion if you don't believe that the 6-inch range increase is worth it to your playstyle or your list build. Before I get into the stratagems proper, I'd like to go over a caveat that almost all of them have. 4 out of 6 stratagems in this detachment have the added benefit of targeting 2 units, so long as the initial unit is a battle line. Essentially, if the stratagem targets a battle line, you can also target a friendly Skitarii unit that is within 6 inches of the originally targeted battle line. Unfortunately, the additional unit cannot be any Cult Mechanicus or Legio Cybernetica unit, further adding to the reliance of Skitarii units on your list. They can also be played around by your opponent if they understand the sequencing of your army, so it's good to try and understand how they can, which we will get into as we examine these individually. For now, assume that every stratagem I talk about has the multi-targeting, unless I point out that it doesn't, for the sake of simplicity. The first stratagem we have is Baleful Halo for 2 CP. During your fight phase, you can target a unit from your army to exclude vehicles. This has the multi-targeting premise of battle line to nearby Skitarii, and when the targeted unit is fought, the enemy subtracts 1 from the wound roll. Unfortunately, this stratagem falls short in 2 aspects. Firstly, the CP cost of 2 is ridiculously steep. Secondly is how the multi-target is extremely situational here, only getting its worth if both a battle line unit and a nearby Skitarii were charged. Otherwise, the mileage of the cost won't go very far. Secondly, we have our other 2 CP cost stratagem of Bulwark Imperative. With the same multi-targeting ability, it allows us after a unit has been targeted in our opponent's shooting phase to grant our selected targets a +4 invuln save. While ridiculously steep for the price, this can be played around by the aforementioned sequencing. Your opponent can shoot the non-battle line unit which you would choose to select first, forcing your hand to only be able to target that unit and not the battle line that would spread the multi-link, effectively halving the efficiency of an already expensive stratagem. On to the 1 CP stratagems now, and we start with a stinker. Extinction Order allows a tech priest to target an objective marker within 24 inches of it in your command phase. A d6 is rolled for every enemy unit on that point, and on a 4+, it suffers a devastating 1 mortal wound and is forced a battle shock test. I don't really know what you're planning to bring to extinction with 1 mortal wound, but this is pretty underwhelming. If this thing Karthus ulted every objective marker to force battle shocks battlefield wide with some damage, it could have been good, and actually do some meaningful damage to anything on a 1 targeted point. More like Extinker Order with how bad it is. Aggressor Imperative is used for 1 CP during your movement phase. With the multi-target premise, it allows you to auto-advance 6 inches. This is extremely solid use of CP, as it allows you to reliably close in 2 units turn after turn. As a huge fanboy of Dragoons myself, this allows your Dragoons to set themselves up for a nasty full 6-inch advance and charge, while also potentially knitting you back to CP with their broad spectrum data tether abilities. This is also solid with rapidly ingressed Skystalkers, allowing them on the following turn to move, advance 6, shoot and scoot another potentially 12 inches provided that they would finish wholly within 6 inches of battle line. That's a whopping 30 inches of movement should everything be aligned correctly. These flying distractions can lock your opponents into the deployment zone with their quick movement and allow your Fallout Detachment rule to keep them battle shock, forcing desperate escapes. Pre-calibrated perch solution is 1 CP during your shooting phase, targeting a unit or multi-targeting with the battle line / Skitarii nearby to allow you to reroll hit rolls so long as you are targeting something in the enemy deployment zone. While situational, it's pretty solid for anything that can reliably draw line of sight there, such as units being dropped off in a transport and units that can deep strike in. Most of the units that can close in quickly and reliably, however, don't exactly have the most potent firepower, so that's something to keep in mind. This can also target any AdMech unit, so that twin-linked Sustain 1 Rapid Fire 9-shot Stubber Dune Rider can shred any light to medium infantry that's bundled up, or a faraway Disintegrator with a Belarus cannon can reroll the indirect shots, but just know you'll only be targeting half as many units as you can. Our last stratagem is a very simple one, giving a unit's ranged weapons lethal hits for 1 CP. This one does not have the multi-targeting premise, so it's 1 and only 1. Best used for any mass fire units such as aforementioned Sky Stalkers, infiltrators you might have up front, or Corpuscari you took in a transport to hit up on those tougher units that they otherwise couldn't wound. Very solid, you'll probably get a couple of uses out of it. This detachment still leans into the battle line and Skitarii chains that we find ourselves bound to across the Codex, but thankfully allow us to play other units with some decent buffs across the board. The enhancements here really shine in my opinion, being uninteresting but just very solid. Sustained hits on breacher bricks definitely powers them up to a gross level, or giving them stealth protects them against their biggest weakness. The ability to bring Scorpius Disintegrators to make long range shots into your opponent's deployment zone, while giving them a pre-calibrated perk solution to make it connect is also solid, if not situational. Movement shenanigans yet again takes the cake here, with either aggressively moving Dragoons and Ruststalkers, or tactically move blocking and screening with Sky Stalkers using the Aggressor Imperative stratagem. It's a generalist detachment, so don't expect to get much if not the fluffiest detachment ability in the Codex in my opinion. But the Halo's Creed Battleclade, blessed be its text, gives it a run for its money on how it can include various units across our roster. Find out what playstyle works for you in this attachment, be it trying to maximize the targets for your stratagems, capitalize on breacher bricks with stronger enhancements, or play hardcore difficulty Skitarii Hunter cohort with its movement shenanigans. Either way, it's a pretty fun detachment to play. Before we wrap up, please stick around for a little announcement at the end of the video. Otherwise, this concludes the deep dive into the Rad-Zone court, and I'll see you in the next one. Oh Hi there. Hey, here's something interesting. The Codex analysis video performed way better than I could have expected. And funnily enough, while I thanked you all at the end of the video for getting me to 100 subscribers, the channel tripled in size on its release, and the video was nearly 10 times as much views as the other content in this channel. For that, I'd like to thank every single one of you for the support and interaction, and welcome all the new viewers. I hope you all enjoy the past and future content that I will be bringing here. That being said, I announced the Patreon and Ko-Fi for this channel, and I'm starting the first giveaway for the $5 tier patrons on March, announcing the winner on the 15th of every month onwards. This month I'll be giving one randomly picked Patreon an AdMech HQ of their choice, excluding Claw because he's a bit pricier. This is also going to be a bit limited as I'd like to support my local LGSs, so if the unit isn't in stock, I'll be sure to communicate with you and adjust your choice if something is available. Also, there's no one in the higher membership tier, so you might just be able to flat out snag an HQ for $5, which is pretty solid and the only thing you should be thinking about right now.
He was watching his